morning, or depending on when you're watching this, good afternoon, good evening, or good night. My name is Ross, and as always told, out of Voice of Radio. So today, we need to be continuing our look at the complete history of the Pokemon trading card game by taking a look at EX Sandstorm, the second of the EX era sets, the second set since Wizards of the Coast took the game back from the Pokemon Company. And as we say in these videos, please make sure you spam that like button. Please make sure you let me know you want these videos to carry on. So, EX Sandstorm then. It was released in Japanese on the 18th of April 2003, and it was released in the UK, US, Europe, etc. on September the 17th, 2003. And one thing that was very, very interesting with this set is that we actually had English exclusive cards for the first time since Team Rocket. Japan would get those cards later, but for a period of time we actually had cards that hadn't come out in Japan. And we're not talking little insignificant pre-evolutions, we're talking things like Aerodactyl EX and Kabutops EX, so that's kinda cool. I should give a shout out to the lovely people over at Bulbapedia for that information. Great website for research. Now, speaking of EXs, it was the second set that had them, but it was the first set that gave us evolved EXs. Raichu would be a good example of this. Back in EX Ruby and Sapphire, we only had basic EXs, so we didn't know if they could be evolutions or not. This was a set in which we got our answer. It was also the set in which we broke the 120 HP barrier. You see, in the base set, we had Chansey. Cool. It had 120 HP. And actually, later on in EX Ruby and Sapphire, we got Chansey EX, who had 120 HP. But up until this set, we had never seen a Pokemon with more than 120 HP. Well, this set broke it. We'd seen plenty of Pokemon with 120 HP, but it wasn't until Sandstorm EX that we went past it, and we actually had 5. Aggron EX had 150, Gardevoir EX had 150, Kabutops EX had 150, Typhlosion EX took it a little bit further and came in with 160, before Wailord blew them all out of the water with 200 HP. Which broke the record for the most amount of HP we'd ever seen in the game. Now, 200 HP would be equaled with the Wailord from Great Encounters and the Wailord from Dragons Exalted, but 200 HP would not actually be beaten until we got Mega Blastoise with 220 and Mega Venusaur with 230 in the X and Y expansion of the Pokemon trading card game, which was launched in February 2014, 11 years later. Yeah, it took us 11 years to break Wailord's record. Wailord himself was able to match it a couple times, but it wouldn't be beaten for 11 years. Speaking of which, we actually got the first ever Pokemon as well, with a retreat cost of 5. It was also Wailord. I have done a video about this Wailord. It was somewhat of a record breaker. Now, we had a bunch of Pokemon with a retreat cost of 5, but it is worth pointing out that we haven't actually seen one again since the Mamoswine in Stormfront. That was the last Pokemon with a retreat cost of 5. Easy to remember due to my unconditional love of Mamoswine. Retreat cost of 5 seems to have gone away and has been gone for quite some time, but this Wailord was the first one that brought it out here. And I think I've mentioned them all, but let's very quickly go through the EXs in set order, just in case we've actually missed one. So we had Aerodactyl EX, we had Aggron EX, we had Gardevoir EX, that one won Worlds, that was pretty gosh darn good, certainly the best one in the set. We had Kabutops EX, Raichu EX, Typhlosion EX, and Wailord EX, who was very much a record breaker and did actually get a top 8 finish at Worlds. Colin Mole was the pilot, which is kind of ridiculous ridiculous, if you ask me. But then again, it was a big surprise at Worlds, and I've told you in a couple of videos lately that information sharing was not as prevalent back then. Bulbapedia makes this point, but I would have made it even if they hadn't. Maybe if information sharing had been more prevalent, Wailord wouldn't have been a rogue deck. It would have been an archetype. If you speak to players that were playing back then, a lot of them actually said that Wailord, in hindsight, was a very, very good deck. Now, while we're talking about the EXs here, it's very important to note that this was actually the set that introduced double weaknesses. So if we have a look at Aerodactyl EX, you're weak to lightning. If we have a look at Raichu EX, you're weak to fighting. To be expected, nothing unusual. But if we look at the other EXs, it starts getting weird. Aggron EX is weak to fire and fighting. Gardevoir EX is weak to both grass and psychic. Kabutops EX is weak to both grass and lightning. Typhlosion EX is weak to both water and fighting. And Wailord EX is weak to both grass and lightning. So the two that didn't have gigantic HP, they've only got one weakness, but all the ones that broke the record in terms of HP all came in with a second weakness. Now, in terms of the most expensive cards from the set, it really was the two good EXs. It was Gardevoir and Wailord. They'll only set you back somewhere in the region of $20, $25, like I've told you last week. We are past the e-reader era of ridiculous price cards into the far more sensible EX era of nothing's really that expensive. So yeah, they're the most expensive you'll get, and even they're not too bad. This was the first Wizards of the Coast set that had a pre-release, and this would start a trend now where there would be a pre-release with a pre-release promo every set, essentially. And it was Armaldo. Not a particularly stunning card, but the first Wizards of the Coast era pre-release promo, so definitely one worth mentioning. Now, in terms of theme decks, we had two like we tend to. We had Oasis, and we had Caravan. Now, Oasis was a water fighting deck with Armaldo on the front of the box, and you did get a holo Armaldo in the box. You also got yourself a rare Sandslash and a rare multi-energy, continuing our theme of getting free rares in a theme deck. Moving over to Caravan, it was a grass fire deck with Cradily on the box, and you got yourself a holo Cradily and two rare Arcanine. I would have gone Armaldo personally, but maybe that's just me. Now, in terms of the best cards, there were only 100 cards in the set, which, as we've seen lately, is kind of small. And there weren't a huge amount of completely crushing cards, but there were, I would say, 7 cards in the set that really, really made their money. First of all, we had Dunsparce. Dunsparce was a ridiculous card for getting set up. Dunsparce had the attack Strike and Run. For 1 colourless energy, you search your deck for up to 3 basic Pokemon and put them onto your bench. And you then even had the option of switching Dunsparce to the bench if you so wished. And this, I mean, look, it was used in a whole bunch of decks, but one thing I find very illuminating, it actually made its way into 3 of the printed World decks. So Team Rushdown was used by Kevin Nguyen to come second at the World Championships in 2004. That featured a bunch of Dunsparce. We saw it in the Dark Tyranitar deck, with which Takashi Yaneda went and took second in the Seniors Division at the 2005 World Championships, and it made its way into King of the West, the deck used by Michael Gonzalez to take a semi-finalist finish in the Juniors Division of the 2005 World Championships. Pretty gosh darn good. The other one that was a pretty phenomenal support Pokemon was Wobbuffet. Now, Wobbuffet was one of these Pokemon that had Safeguard, and we've seen many, many Pokemon since that did. Although I believe, and I will double check this just to make sure we're right here, it was the first card to ever have the Safeguard ability. Now, and it was indeed the first one. Now, what Safeguard does is it prevents all effective attacks, including damage, done to Wobbuffet, by your opponent's Pokemon EX, though it was a Pokebody back then, not an ability. Pokebody because it was passive. And it basically just made you immune to Pokemon EXs. It was pretty gosh darn good. And it also made its way into... well, it made its way into a couple of printed world decks as well. It's made its way into Rocky Beach, that Swampert deck, which was played by Reed Whitecler, a junior finalist from the 2004 World Championships. And it made its way into Bright Aura, that Metacham deck, which was piloted by Curran Hill, who won the juniors division in the 2005 World Championships. And I'm not saying these are the only decks it was played in. I'm using these as examples. I'm using this to prove the point that they must have been very good widely played cards, or they wouldn't have made them into multiple decks that did so well at Worlds they ended up getting printed. Now, there were two EXs that were very good and widely played. I've already mentioned them. One of them was Gardevoir. And Gardevoir wasn't a card that was featured in a deck that did well at Worlds. Gardevoir just took second at Worlds. Kevin Nguyen's deck, the Team Rushdown deck with which he got second place at the World Championships in 2004, was a Gardevoir deck. It used the Gardevoir we looked at last week, the one from Expedition that accelerated energy, and then it used Gardevoir EX as its main attacker. Now, the attack of Gardevoir GX, there were a couple here. We had Feedback. Count the number of cards in your opponent's hand and put that many damage counters on the defending Pokemon for 2 energy. Not bad. And 4 energy, Sandstorm, 10 damage for each energy attached to all Pokemon in play. So if they've got a large hand size, Feedback. If there's lots of energy on the field, Sandstorm. It was one of the very, very best decks in the entire game. And like I say, second in the Masters Division. That's pretty gosh darn good, ladies and gentlemen. That's pretty gosh darn good. The other card that was really very, very good here is Wailord. Wailord was a very good card. And here's the thing, right? 200 HP, even though EXs gave up 2 prizes, 200 HP is phenomenal and ridiculous and over the top and brilliant. Now, 1 colorless energy if you've got any bench Pokemon. Remove 3 damage counter and switch it one of your bench. It's fine. If you need to get out the active because you're about to be KO'd, if you need to heal up, fine. But 4 energy, 100 damage, minus 10 for each damage counter on Wailord. So the theory here was extremely simple. Try and get 5 energy on Wailord, smash for 100, don't get KO'd because you've got a ridiculous amount of HP, and heal up when you need to. It was absolutely something that worked. We'll get to a list in a moment. Now, there were 2 trainers and 1 special energy that were also pretty good from the set. Wally's Training was a very nice card. Let you search your deck for a card that evolved from your active Pokemon and put it on your active Pokemon. Great for getting easier evolution. And this was featured in both the Rocky Beach and Bright Aura Worlds decks. Multi-Energy was a very, very nice card. It was one of any energy, but if you've already got a special energy attached, it's just a colorless energy. So it's kind of like Rainbow Energy, except it only works if it is the only special energy on that particular Pokemon. Otherwise, it fails. But it got played in Blaziken tech, and it also did make its way into some Wailord lists as well, so I'm counting that as pretty gosh darn good, ladies and gentlemen. And the last one we saw was Lynette's Net Search. Now this again is a card which will seem familiar to newer players. Search your deck for up to 3 different types of basic Pokemon cards, excluding baby Pokemon, and put them into your hand. So if you were playing a mono-typing deck, it wasn't good, but if you were playing multiple different types in your deck, then Lynette's Deck Search became really, really good. Now, in terms of decks, as far as I'm concerned, there were basically 2 decks that came around because of EX Sandstorm. Now, one of them I've already given you a bunch of information on. It was the Gardevoir deck that did extremely well at Worlds in 2004. It was just Gardevoir and Gardevoir EX. There wasn't a huge amount more to the particular deck. It played Delcatty and Oracle. Oracle to search out cards, Delcatty to make sure you drew them. And it did actually play the Magneton from EX Dragon, because it had the ability, once during your turn, if you have a basic energy in a discard pile, you may discard a card from your hand, and then search for 2 basic energy from your discard pile, show them to your opponent, and put them into your hand. In a deck that needed lots and lots of energy, that comes out as a pretty gosh darned good Pokemon. But we're looking at Dragon next. That's the next set coming up, so we'll talk about it more next week. But it really was a Gardevoir deck. Let's make no mistake about it. It was a Gardevoir deck. The other deck that came around was Wailord, and like I said, Wailord was no joke deck. Wailord was a deck that went and got itself a top 8 finish at the 2004 World Championships. Now, essentially, what happened in EX Sandstorm was that we got a bunch of fossils. We got ourselves Claw Fossil, Mysterious Fossil, and Root Fossil. But it was an item card, it was a trainer card at the time, that you played down as a basic Pokemon, but if it's knocked out, it doesn't count as a knocked out Pokemon. So what you would do is you would play a bunch of fossils, and Colin played 10 fossils. And you would set up Wailord behind those fossils. Wailord was very, very, very slow, but that's okay, because you could buy yourself turn after turn after turn to get the energy on. Now, it's also very, very much worth noting here that Root Fossil, at any time between turns, you removed 1 damage counter from Root Fossil. So if your opponent didn't one-hit KO you, that could actually keep you around a little bit longer. And Claw Fossil, if it is damaged by an opponent's Pokemon, even if it's knocked out, you put 1 damage counter on the attacking Pokemon, and that could make a difference. It's why it's 4 Claw, 4 Root, and only 2 Mysterious Fossil. The other cards you would play here is you'd actually play a Blossom/Vileplume line. You see, Blossom, now it wouldn't come out till EX Hidden Legends, but once during your turn it let you remove 2 damage counters from one of your Pokemon. Though it was limited to once during your turn, you couldn't stack this ability. But still, good for healing Wailord. And Vileplume EX in the active would turn off trainer cards. And remember, what you're trying to do here is buy yourself time to set up Wailord. So if you found your opponent in a position where they needed trainer cards to get set up, Vileplume EX would be like, ha, now you can't use them. Fun little tech. This is exactly the kind of deck which I really, really wish I had been playing more at the time so that I could have played it. This Wailord EX deck is absolutely my bag. This is exactly the kind of card, exactly the kind of deck that I would have been playing at the time. So there you go, ladies and gentlemen. Lots of fun cards. Like I said, it wasn't a set that completely and utterly changed the metagame, but it gave us 2 Pokemon in Dunsparce and Wobbuffet that really helped out a whole bunch of decks. It gave us 2 trainers and 1 special energy that helped out a bunch of decks, and it brought in 2 decks that did very well at the 2004 World Championships, so that alone makes us look at Sandstorm and go, yeah, pretty good set. Pretty good set. So there we go, ladies and gentlemen. That's what I think about Sandstorm. That's everything you need to know. But I'd like to hear from you guys. I'd like to know your memories. I'd like to know what cards you played at the time. I'd like to know if you did play, and I'd like to know if you didn't and what you think as someone who is seeing these cards now for the first time. Also, make sure you spam that like button. So go nuts in the comment section, but be nice, would ya? And then make sure you like this video, subscribe to this channel, follow me on Twitter at The Wassy, and Twitch for some live action at twitch.tv/PTCGRadio. If you want to support the channel, get some bonus podcasts and all that good stuff, head on over to patreon.com/PTCGRadio, where you can do exactly that. And please do make sure you're checking out youtube.com/WassyPlays, where you can find out about a whole bunch of games that don't have Pokemon in, but are pretty gosh darned awesome nonetheless. But by far the most important thing, as always, look after yourselves till next time, would ya? Thank you very much for watching. My name's Ross, and you've been watching PTCG Radio.